too, is that the European Stability Pact, to which Britain doesn't belong because we're not part of the failing euro currency zone, but the regulations, that the treaty that sets up that pact creates a governing council which can, at will, whenever it likes, call upon any of the member states of that group, the European Stability Pact, for unlimited amounts of money. And what is more, the people who are on this governing council, who are of course elected by nobody, they're so unaccountable that even if they decided to take the money and run off with it and put it into their bank accounts in the Cayman Islands or Switzerland or Belgium, which is now becoming one of the biggest money laundering centers in the world, then the Stability Pact terms say that those people cannot be prosecuted and they cannot be sued in any civil court either. They are completely immune. They have absolute financial power over all the countries that belong to that treaty, absolute power. And even if they choose to exercise that power criminally, nobody can do anything to stop them.
Wow.
That is how, that of course is
That's
dictatorship
amazing.
in the formal sense.
Well, now, of course, even though you're not a part of the euro, the mismanagement of the euro is driving immigration from the European Union into Britain. As the questions were being presented to David Cameron the other night, people were saying, why is it that unskilled workers that are being put out of work by mismanagement in these other states are given preference over skilled immigrants coming into our country? When we come back, we're going to take a look at what happened in that question and answer period with David Cameron. And we have Lord Monkton talking about the Brexit vote coming up tomorrow. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Lord Monkton. Of course, the vote as to whether or not Britain is going to remain or leave the European Union is tomorrow. Will it be Britain's Independence Day, as Boris Johnson said in his closing remarks, or will they lose the opportunity? We'll see what happens. It is neck and neck. And, of course, they were up by 19 points before the member of parliament was killed last week, 1 week before the election. And now we've seen a 26-point swing in some of the polls. Right now, they have recovered, and it looks like it is neck and neck. Nobody is predicting that. I see that as a very bad sign, because we always know that the vested interests are going to be able to swing the votes. I know that's the case in America. We'll ask Lord Monkton what he thinks about that in the UK as well. But before we get back to Lord Monkton, I want to point out we've extended the Tim Kennedy special for one more day. That's our 15% off of Super Male Vitality, Brain Force, and Secret 12 at InfoWarsLife.com. These are the products that Tim Kennedy, as you've seen him talk to Alex Jones, and of course he is not only a special forces, but he also is a UFC fighter. And he trains intensively for both of those things. And he says what helps him the most, that he has felt the biggest improvement in, are these three products: Super Male Vitality, Brain Force, and Secret 12. And so we've put those together, call it the Tim Kennedy Special, 15% off. It's been such a big seller, Alex has extended that one more day at InfoWarsLife.com. 15% off Super Male Vitality, Brain Force, and Secret 12. That's the Tim Kennedy Special. Lord Monkton, I want to play this clip from the question and answer period a couple of days ago with David Cameron. And it touches on a huge part of this issue, and of course that's immigration. That is an economic issue, as well as a cultural issue, as well as a crime issue. We see what's happening throughout Europe. This is what the people said. Of course, this is a television program. They had an audience. They said it was evenly divided between people who were for and against remaining in the European Union, and some people who were undecided, they said. And they let the audience ask questions to David Cameron, the Prime Minister. And here's a couple of those questions real quickly. I want to get your response after we play this.
Mr. Cameron, you keep saying that you propose to stop immigrants allowed to claim benefits. Is this just a proposal, or can you enforce it, or have you got to go back to the EU to get it enforced?
Very good question. It's agreed, yes, sir. It's agreed by the 27 other prime ministers and presidents. It's part of what will become a legally binding document, and these changes are coming in. The head of the European Parliament has said that too. So these are things, they come in. If we vote yes to remain in the reformed European Union on Thursday, those proposals get put in front of the European Parliament and start to be passed straight away.
What happens if somebody vetoes you?
Well, they've all agreed they won't. This is, they've all agreed.
How can we believe that?
You say that your policy that you've negotiated with Europe cannot be overruled. It can. So are you really the 21st century Neville Chamberlain waving a piece of paper in the air, saying to the public, this is what I have. I have this promise where a dictatorship in Europe can overrule it. That simple question, yes or no, please?
What I can say to you is the other 27 prime ministers and presidents have agreed it. And they know if Britain votes to remain, they will implement it. And I think, you know, look, this is not some empire and dictatorship. This is, we're proving. Hang on, sir. We're proving.
There you go. Prove it. Prove it. He says you're just a Neville Chamberlain waving a piece of paper that has absolutely no effect. You've got some promises from these people. They can renege on these promises. He says, well, they told me if we stay in, they're going to do something to improve this immigration thing. They're not buying it. Lord Monkton, your comments.
Imagine if you in the United States were told that you had to depend on the will of 27 other nations, any one of whom could say no to you.
Yeah.
Now, the history of Britain's appeals, for instance, to the so-called European so-called Court of so-called Justice, which is the European Union's rubber stamp court, is that in 80% of all cases brought by Britain to try to get its way in the European Union, under David Cameron, it has lost those cases. The average has been 75%, and it's now gone up to 80% that we lose. We have absolutely no influence whatsoever. And in all 72 instances of where the British Parliament has tried to say no under David Cameron to European laws, in every single one of those cases, the European law has been enacted anyway. We have absolutely no say in Europe. And David Cameron is pretending that somehow we are all in the club together and we can do what we want. The fact is, the only way we can control immigration, and you're quite right that after democracy, immigration is the next biggest issue. The only way we can control immigration is to come out of the EU. And I'll give you the figures to show you why it is. We are getting something like 1 million people a year in net terms coming into the UK and staying there. How do we know? Because although the official immigration figures say it's about 300,000 or 400,000, the true figures are given by what are called the national insurance numbers issued. And something like 600,000 of those every year are being issued to EU nationals coming to Britain, and another 400,000 being issued to foreigners, so who are beyond the EU. So we know that immigration is at 2 or 3 times the rate the official figures show, because national insurance numbers, you can't work without one, you can't claim benefit without one. The two things that people want to do when they come to Britain is either to work or to claim benefit. So we know from that immigration is on a far larger scale than this government wants to admit. We know that the vast majority of that immigration is coming just from the 27 other nations of the EU, rather than from the 200 other nations worldwide. And so we know that if we want to control immigration, staying in the EU is simply not an option. Those are the hard figures, the figures that don't really get into the papers much. The Daily Telegraph revealed this morning or yesterday morning this scam by which the government is undercounting immigration by a very, very large scale. And the national insurance numbers which allow you to work or to claim benefit are the much more revealing figure. And the revenue people, the IRS in the UK, actually keep statistics on who these numbers are being allocated to every year. So we know that immigration is happening at a far larger scale than it should. And we know that the only way to control that is to come out. Now, let's look at Cameron's saying that he's got the agreement of the other 27 member states. Fact is that all that has to happen now is a coalition against us in the European Parliament, because everybody except Britain wants immigration to continue to be free and easy, because they can just export the immigrants straight to Britain, where they all seem to end up, because we have a more generous benefit system, one with far fewer checks on it, and also everybody speaks English, which they don't in most other European countries. So everybody who is an immigrant wants to come to Britain because it's a civilized and friendly place as well. So they may well, in the European Parliament, say, well, we're going to vote this down. Now, of course, the commissars could simply say they were going to push it through anyway, but they don't like Britain, so they probably wouldn't. And what David Cameron is admitting to here is, in effect, is that he has lost control of immigration completely, and he has no control whatsoever about what the European Union will do to us if we remain. The only way we will get control over our immigration is if we come out of the European Union, and then we can tell people from the European Union how many of them can come in. We'll obviously want skilled workers to come in. We'll want people who are being treated badly by the EU or by any member state to come in via the asylum rules, just as we always have done internationally. If you're in hardship and you have nowhere else to turn, Britain will always welcome you. What we're not going to have is this tide of economic migrants. I mean, there'll be another 72 million of them if Turkey joins the EU.
Yes.
And although Mr. Cameron pretends he doesn't want Turkey to join the EU, privately and behind the scenes, he's been working overtime to try and get Turkey in. He is trying quite deliberately to destroy Britain as an independent country so as to establish this world elite dictatorship. If anybody is listening thinks this sounds extreme, that is because his ambition is extreme. The ambition of these people is to do away with democracy altogether. And the single biggest threat to their plan is this vote tomorrow. So if you are listening in the United Kingdom, or you have friends in the United Kingdom who are dithering about how to vote, tell them that this is their one chance to do not only Britain, but also Europe and the world a favor by striking a blow, and a very strong blow, for democracy. And I suppose we might use the words of a well-known film, and we might say, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not go without a fight. And this will be our Independence Day.
Yes, yes. I hope that will be the case. And of course, as you're talking about immigration, it is not simply the quantity of immigration that is causing economic difficulty, but it's also the quality of immigration. We have an article on INFOWARS.com. Calais migrants are rioting and they're chanting F the UK. They demand access to Britain. It's bone-chilling footage that shows their car. Some British holidaymakers driving through thick clouds of tear gas as French riot police battle in vain to restore control on the road leading to the town's port. And of course, this is something that has been going on for quite some time. In Calais, they cannot control the situation that's going there. As you mentioned, David Cameron wants to have Turkey in. This is something else that came up in this question and answer period. As they pointed out, and he didn't deny it, he said, yes, I have said that I would very much like for Turkey to be a member of the European Union. They are already a member of NATO. But he goes, that's not going to happen in my lifetime. I can't really see that happening for another 30 years. And you know, Lord Monkton, it reminded me of the Old Testament story about Hezekiah, where he has the Babylonians come to visit him in Jerusalem, and he shows them all the treasures of Jerusalem. And after they leave, Isaiah comes into him and goes, what have you done? And he goes, here's the message from God. He says, these people will take your sons and they will turn them into slaves and eunuchs. And his response is, good, it won't happen in my lifetime. I mean, that's what we're seeing from David Cameron. Great, it's not going to happen in my lifetime. It'll happen 30 years from now, but it may not happen 30 years from now. It may be sooner. But what a despicable attitude that he would say, fine, we'll let them loot Britain and destroy this country because it won't happen in my lifetime. I'll be able to enjoy this in my lifetime.
Well, that is a very nice parallel. The other favorite one I have from biblical times is that curious story of the Lord of Life when he went into the desert and the devil visited him there and said, oh, look at this splendid world. I will give all of this to you if only you follow me. Now, that was a very curious and rather dumb thing for the devil to say because, of course, the Lord of Life already owned the world and indeed the whole universe. Didn't need to be given it by anybody. And so often we are given these exaggerated promises by the forces of evil that either that something good will happen when they know perfectly well it won't, or that something bad, if it ever were to happen, wouldn't happen in their lifetime. This is the line that the devil always uses to try to buy people's support. Yes. And talking of buying people's support, that's really what the entire Remain campaign, the people who want to stay in the EU, that's what they've been doing. They've been using two things. One is fear, saying we can't survive on our own in the tough old world if we come out of the EU. Well, it wasn't that long ago that we had an empire that covered a quarter of the globe and the sun never set on it. It's not as though we haven't had practice in making our own way